welcome to the Dadhammer podcast, where we discuss all things Warhammer. I am your host, David the Warboss, and I am joined by Medicae Steve, the OG, the two guys. Here we are, where we the ones that started it back. It's almost been a year now where we started this thing. How you doing, Steve?
I'm great, man. This is bananas. I have loved having it. I've loved having everyone else, but it's been I don't know, it's been a while since it's been just the dynamic duo, right?
Yeah. Well, we have, if for those listening, we've got our couple other. We got the Chaplain and the Bearded Ogor, who have been on the podcast a couple of times already.
Stricken.
Oh man, Nurgle's hit them hard. I'm getting texts from the Chaplain earlier today, and he's like, I can't stop coughing. It's probably not great for the podcast. Like, yeah, I appreciate that. So hopefully those guys are going to feel better. It hasn't hit us. Definitely. I was popping some vitamin C today, so I'm hoping that'll.
I got a little vitamin B.
Okay. All right. Well, I probably need all of it. Some vitamins to help me. So. Well, for anyone else who's feeling the touch of Nurgle out there, something's going around. Hopefully everybody stays healthy. Stay indoors and work on your Warhammer strategy. That's always
play some games.
Yeah, play some games, put together some models. That's what I've been doing, and I've got super glue on my fingers to show for it. So all good. Man, we have a packed show. We are right off of pretty big announcement of the latest Balanced Dataslate. So for 40K, for those who are not aware of that is when Games Workshop will look at the results of the latest tournament in the Meta Watch, and they'll see the win percentages and how each army fared in the recent tournaments, and then they'll come out with some changes to the rules or to points or all the above in this case. So lots of big rules changes, some significant things to discuss, and even the Drukhari got a brand new detachment. I mean, just craziness, all kinds of stuff coming out. And then, so we're going to talk a lot about that, and then we'll also hit on the latest update to the official Warhammer 40K app, where they got the command bunker. And I'm a big fan of the app, warts and all, even with all of its little issues. So this is a really cool update, but we've got some thoughts, some opinions on this one. So really excited to get into all of this cool content. Thank you so much for listening to our show. As always, if you like what you're hearing, make sure to rate, follow, subscribe, leave us a review. I've seen several reviews on our show. Everything's been 5 stars so far. I really appreciate that. Just love to hear from folks. So you can also find us on our website, dadhammerstudios.com, where we are posting mostly our video content and some pictures and some articles, all kinds of cool stuff. And also, if you want to reach out to any of us on the Dadhammer team, if you have certain topics you want us to discuss, you want to ask us questions, you want us to read some questions on our show, or maybe cover some things in the videos, drop us an email at contact@dadhammerstudios.com, or you can hit us up on our social media. Instagram's a really good place for us to respond to your requests and whatnot, at Dadhammer Studios. So we'd love to hear from you. So please write in, let us know what's going on. With that, let's get it started. Let's get it kicked off with the Balanced Dataslate, and I'm going to start first. I'm gonna throw up here on the screen for those watching, and if you're just listening, we're gonna step through all of this. The Meta Watch review. So the Games Workshop comes out with the Meta Watch again, which is the win percentage, and they want to hit the sweet spot generally for somewhere in the 45 to maybe mid 50s, mid to low 50s win percentage. And personally, and when I first started playing this game, and I look at the chart, if I see my army at the bottom, like, oh, I don't want to be at the bottom. Well, the person at the bottom, there's still 45% win rate.
That's right.
Which is pretty dang good, right? So, I mean, it's not that bad, but it's telling. The Meta Watch always gives you an idea of maybe where they need to make some changes. Potentially, there's a lot of implications with this, as we've talked about in the past. But just to review, kind of top to bottom, they've got Aldari and Necrons are at the top, probably I saw a meme recently where it was from the Lord of the Rings, where they're doing you've already had breakfast. We've had one, yes, but what about second breakfast? Well, I saw a meme that was, how about an Aldari nerf? And you've already had one. We've had one, yes, but how about a second nerf? I mean, I feel like they're going to need something. There wasn't a lot done, and we're going to get into some of the changes a little bit, but Aldari and Necrons are at the top, so expect to see them especially in the next data slate. They'll put in some pretty significant changes, I would guess, maybe some points increases or some rules nerfs. My boys, Leagues of Votann, are sitting strong, right below the threshold.
And
so that's okay. I'm not complaining.
You've got 3 in the top 5. That's looking good.
I got Necrons, Leagues of Votann, Chaos Space Marines, Space Wolves, and Orcs. So I'm sitting pretty right now, but it wasn't too long ago that the Leagues of Votann were at the very bottom, dig in the trenches. So I don't know. I mean, at the very bottom now, we've got Blood Angels, Drukhari, and Astra Militarum, and then the Tyranids, surprisingly. So, Steve, any thoughts on the Meta Watch and the result? Anything surprising you here?
No. I mean, I think that light blue band, sort of in the middle, tells the story. Yep. And all right, Aldari and Necrons are over that, but everybody else is pretty much touching it or floating in it. That's pretty good. I mean, I can see Eldari's been strong since the end of 9th. Necrons had a nice little bump with new models and new interest, and they had a new codex. So I can definitely see them climbing. They had a pretty powerful codex even before what they dialed them back. But I still think that people can, I don't know. It's just availability and exposure. Maybe more people play it. I don't know. And they are good. They did get some good stuff. Yeah. I'm still surprised with Chaos Space Marines. They've sort of been the poor stepchild through 9th. They were struggling hard through 9th, and they have clawed their way balanced. Up. They are, and they have not had a lot of changes.
Yeah, I agree. I think Chaos Space Marines are in a good place. They are. They don't feel exceptionally powerful. But that's not a bad thing. That means they're not swingy, right? They're just solid. Even when I play Combat Patrol, they're one of the better Combat Patrols, I think.
I agree.
I put them out there, and I don't feel like I've got any weak links. No units in the Combat Patrol that are like, oh man, I wish they would have put something else in here. No, it's a pretty solid squad, and I think in contrast, leagues. Not all Combat Patrols are created equal. Leagues of Votann Combat Patrol is pretty bad. Like it's not.
Is
great.
It?
It's just, I mean, it's got the bikers, the pioneers in there. But if you take those bikers out, it's game over. Really, there's just not a lot there. And I bet you do. But I think overall, I mean, to me, this is the sign of a healthy game. As much as the internet's going to complain about their army of choice not being in the top or being extra difficult to play, I still feel like we're in a good place here.
I do too. I think it's just happy. I mean, I know our level of seriousness about it is different, right? So we look at it differently. But I mean, I remember times when that swing was, that was big. I remember during 9th, there were teams that or factions that were just unstoppable. Everybody. I remember when Drukhari was the thing. I mean, they were just so scary, and I don't know what really happened. I can't remember any data slates back then, but I don't know. It just happens. I think it just happens. But it's good that it's within 10 points, right? It's within about 10 percentage points now. I don't even know it's been that close since 10th came out.
Yeah, I mean, usually not since 10th came out. They got to that place in 9th. It usually takes them a little while in each edition to get that close. But as much as people like to complain, about everything, any type of change. I
Sure,
think
sure.
Games Workshop consistently does a good job of trying to keep things even keel. And
Mhm.
if your worst army is still winning 45% of the time and your best army is winning only 10% more,
Mhm.
that's a pretty good balance. So like if
I think
if you're
so.
a new player listening to this and you're thinking about what army should I start with, well, a little plug. I've got a video coming up here this Sunday, so make sure you
Yeah.
check that out. The top 5 40K armies to start with for new players. But if you're, regardless of whatever I say in the video, and make sure you tune in for that. But regardless of any of that stuff, like you really can't go wrong. I mean, if you like
No.
the look of an army, you're gonna the win percentage. Now, all of that is based on you remembering everything, which is
That's right.
classic
Yes,
our
most
problem. I always
definitely.
forget stuff. So as soon as I play an army, all of the percentages are thrown out the door because I forget,
Yep.
speaking of percentages, I forget a large percentage of the things I'm supposed to remember to make them
Yeah.
powerful. So I'm just like, yeah, well.
I
So
forget the best percentages.
yeah. So rule of cool still very
Yes.
much applies.
Definitely real
Well,
cool.
so let's get in then to the rules commentary. There is a very large document that they released, and it's named a little weird. I don't know what rules commentary means. They've got all kinds of stuff in here. It's
Mhm.
updates to rules. That's the errata. They have a little bit of commentary from the game designers. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's like a update more in paragraph form versus army specific. These are more core rules updates. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight a few because the document is fairly massive, and but we're just going to hit some that are, I would say, the most significant or at least most impactful to us, and as far as we're concerned.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit 3. The one is the big change to what we call sticky objectives, or the how you can contest and control objective markers. Then we're going to talk about the reserves, the updates to arriving in strategic reserves, and what the impact is on those changes. And then a very sneaky rule that if you've got some infiltrators, you're going to be in for a treat, because now you can do all kinds of cool stuff with the redeploy changes that they've made. So we're going to hit those 3. I will start first with this sticky objective. Fairly big change, I would think. It's a small change, but it makes a bigger impact, I think,
Mhm.
depending on how you play. And so the change is a sticky objective. For those that are not aware, what that means is that you go capture an objective, and some rules, especially if you play combat patrol, it's an automatic sticky objective. But some units have an ability to, like Death Guard, for example, where they can go on an objective and then go off of it. They can move away from it and still have control, and therefore gain those victory points. In 10th edition, the raw, before this update, it was you would determine the control of the objective. And Steve, keep me on point here, because I'm trying to
Mhm.
make sure I get it straight.
It,
But
it's yeah.
you determined who controlled the objective at the end of the turn. So end of, if I'm playing you, you would determine the control of that at the end of the player's turn.
Right.
And so that's when you determined it. And now it is determining the control at the end of the phase or
Mhm.
turn.
Mhm.
So let's say, as a scenario, and the reason this is a big change, and it makes it a little more thematic, which I think is cool. So let's say that you and I are playing, and on my turn I go first, and I move on to an objective, and I capture it. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Now I have or I'm going up, and let's say you control an objective and I am moving up towards you, and you control that objective, but on this particular phase I'm going to charge. So I
Mhm.
charge you, we go into the fight phase. I end up defeating you, or outscoring that, and now I control that. So essentially at the end of the phase or turn is when you can take over the control of the objective. That's the way I understand it.
Mhm.
Steve, I don't know if you have a better way to explain it, but I think it's fairly impactful on how folks are going to score the victory points as far as when you control objective markers.
Yeah, I feel like it was the one benefit you could get from going second in a
Mm-hmm.
turn if you were on that end of the the dice, I should say. So I feel like all right, you've done your move, shoot, fight. You've done everything, right? I've got a unit on an objective. There's nothing around me. I bebop away, and it's still mine until whenever you show up to get on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can, if we played it correctly, you're gaining those victory points every command phase, until it's no longer yours. However, say like I go my second turn, I wander off and I try to do something else, and then you deep strike something in on that objective, right? Well, now I have to make a choice. I have to come back and fight that. But it just depended on when that happened, right? So I don't know. It was a very weird thing when you're talking about wandering away from objectives and coming back on them, but now it's yours. So
I think that's the point, though, right? That what they're trying to do. I think their intent was to make it more of a battle, so that you are really trying to vie for those. And there are so many units now that have those abilities to do sticky objectives, and where they can leave and then come back or whatever. But now I think it is more of a battle back and forth to get those objectives, because it can be determined at the end of any phase or turn, and it's all going back to those victory points. So I think, this is one of those rules where I read it one time, it makes sense to me, and then I look away for 3 seconds and I come back and I'm like, what did I read again?
That's right.
So and we've been playing this game for a while. And so if anybody listening to this is still struggling with the rules, hey, listen,
welcome aboard.
I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I feel like I have a fairly good grasp on this game. And even this, I'm like, are we doing this right? So
that's right.
It is what it is. I'm excited for the clarity, because if nothing else, I'll be having this right by my side when we're playing a game, and I'll have to read it at least 9 more times to make sure I do it right. So I'm sure somebody will call me out on it. All right, so let's move away from that and talk about these changes to strategic reserves. And so the big change here, and I'll read this aloud: abilities that allow units to be set up in the reinforcement step of your first, second, or third movement phase using the strategic reserves rules treat the current battle round number as being 1 higher than it actually is in the first battle round only, unless explicitly stated otherwise. So I guess, and there's another thing that this changes, and there's another part of the rules commentary that I didn't necessarily include in this one, but there was a big change involving disembarking from transports and what that actually means. So I think what they've done here is that they had some players that were putting units within a transport, having those in strategic reserves, arriving, and then they weren't allowed to disembark. They just kind of had to sit there. Now you're able to do that. You can disembark from a transport that was in reserve, but it's now, this is another complicated rule, but it's now like the order in which all of that happens. So is it in the movement phase? Is it not? Is it in the reserve phase? Because now I think, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, you will not be able to fire Overwatch on a unit coming out of reserve. Is that accurate?
No, you can.
You can fire Overwatch.
Yes, you can, because and I read through this twice or 3 times, maybe 4, to make sure. But the way that rule states, and it has to do with arriving from reserve and setting up on the board. So I think Overwatch covers both of those scenarios. There are other stratagems that do not, right? Like other stratagems. So I want to say arriving from reserve actually falls at the end of your movement phase. So you're still in the movement phase part, right? But all you can do now is get out of the vehicle, but you could shoot. However, you can be shot. And
you can't charge. They're not allowing you to
can't charge. Right. Because you're supposed to just spill out of the vehicle and you're there. I think I'd have to look through it because it wasn't addressed. I think like a Land Raider has that special keyword, like a disembarkment ramp or an embarkment ramp or something along those lines that changes that. That's just sort of a very special unit specific rule where I feel like you could charge out of disembarkment, but I don't know if you come out of reserve, I think that is
Very
totaled. And
special. Yeah.
yeah, I
I
think
think what
coming out of
they're
reserve
trying,
is a different deal.
yeah, they're trying to prevent people, I think, from piling all their
Hmm.
troops into a bunch of transports, holding them all in reserve, and
Hmm.
then your opponent may not have those, and so they come out with if they're orcs or something like that, or a horde army, and then that essentially allows you a huge advantage because now you can just take all that stuff out of reserve,
Hmm.
and dump it on the battlefield, deploy everything, and go ahead and move and shoot, charge, and do everything. And that's just unfair advantage. So
It
on one
is.
hand, I'm thinking, I kind of wish more from a thematic standpoint, I wish I could just barrel out of the transport and guns
Hmm.
ablazing. And there are some abilities that allow you to do that, but this strategic reserve is the limitation on that. So it makes more sense, I think.
Yeah, because you can pop up in someone's deployment zone as long as you're 9
Right.
inches away from them. So yeah, I
Right.
mean, it's probably good enough you can jump out and shoot, but it will
Hmm.
limit. It's going to limit things now. All right? It's going to make it more. You're probably going to put shooty units in transports that you're coming in from reserve.
Yeah.
You're not
Yep.
going to try to dump a bunch of heavy melee guys in there now,
Right.
which I think that's reasonable. I don't think that's too bad.
I think so. I mean, it's a cool update. If nothing else, it
Mm-hmm.
gives a little extra detail, and
Mm-hmm.
to the rules. Which again, it's always nice to have that on the side. So I wanted to pull up the next one, which is about redeploy, and we were talking about strategic reserves. This is something we had mentioned before, and you really brought this to my attention just recently, and I kind of glossed over it. So why don't you help explain, because I'll probably need it,
Yeah.
the big deal about this one and what it means for infiltrators.
So there's a lot of units out there. I think the Raven Wing bikes are going to be one of them. Now, how you deploy depends on the unit itself. Some get to deploy only in their deployment zone, and you can redeploy them. I think Necrons have something too, where you can like take them off the board and
Yeah.
then put them back on the board somewhere else. So this redeploy kind of issue comes in play. The big deal is anything with infiltrate ability, and it's not just Space Marines. I think there are other like scout type units that have that keyword. So when you deploy your armies, you get to take your infiltrator and you can put it, bam, anywhere on the board up to I guess 9 inches away from your
Hmm.
opponent.
Hmm.
So you can put your guy in their deployment zone. You can stick them on a midfield objective, whatever you want to do, right?
Right.
The cool thing is with this redeploy on their part is, and it is very thematic. So, all right, I can put them up on this building next to an objective in cover. Well, now you deploy because you've seen where my guys are, and you're going to put like some infantry killing thing right in the line of sight to where you can wipe them off the board first turn. And I'm like, nope, don't like that. So now I can redeploy them because the first turn hasn't happened yet, but I
Hmm.
can still use the infiltrate ability. That's the way I'm reading it, and that's the way
Yeah.
I've understood it in explanations. So now
Yeah.
I can just be like, I don't like them there. You've deployed your entire army, so I'm just going to scoot these guys over here in a safe spot because you kind of taken a gamble and pushed them all over there. So it's probably a good thing to know that against your opponent as well, that they might be able to do
Yeah,
that to you.
and I wonder. I'm always thinking about, is this because I could see this be very powerful. I'm not
Hmm.
I mean, none of us in our group are ones to go out and buy a ton of any one type of unit because I just don't
Right.
think that's fun. I mean,
Hmm.
even if I mean, I have a bunch of orc boys, for example, in my orcs because that's what I'm supposed to have. But for example, for Votan, I liked the Hecaton Land Fortress. I think that's a cool
Hmm.
model, and the pioneers. I've got 2 squads of pioneers because that makes sense to round them out. I mean, some people are going out and doing like 4, 6 units of that. To
Mm,
me, that's not fun to me. And
that's not fun.
if you have fun with that and you love doing that, I mean, more power to you. I
Hmm.
think this might make folks go out and, I wonder if you go out now and look for infiltrators if they're all out of stock, right?
We'll talk about it one day if the White Dwarf ever arrives, but that new Space Marines combat patrol
right,
detachment, right? That whole Vanguard box was nothing but Phobos infiltrator type units. So I don't know. There you might see them start flying. Though I will say the good thing is points value, and we're probably going to touch on that later. They're kind of high in points. I mean, they cost more than your regular infantry kind of battle line troops. So that sort of rounds out that ability a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, again, going back to the word thematic. I think I've said that like 9 times this show, but I think that visually, and it just makes me imagine the battle scenario of these guys having the tech, being sneaky enough to deploy on the battlefield, find out what's going on, report back to command, and then say, oh, okay, great. Now strategically go redeploy over here. We're going to pick you up or zap you over to this spot of the map. And I just think that's cool, and
it's awesome.
I mean, I think it's cool if somebody's, not doing it to me while in the game, because I'm sure it's incredibly irritating, but still it makes for, I always go back to, a good general is going to be able to react to that kind of stuff and reposition their units. But also think about, for those that are playing against Space Marines, a Space Marine player with some infiltrators, you see them over there, just be ready, just like Deep Strike Terminators or something. Don't leave your backfield wide open. Don't put all of your big guns on one side of the map. You need to spread them out a little bit, or be ready for the potential of that kind of sneakiness, if you will.
That's right.
Cool update. Let's move over now to the actual balanced data slate. By the way, there's a ton more stuff in this rules commentary. I recommend that you go to the Warhammer community site, find that out there, the rules commentary and the Meta Watch article, download that, read through all of it if you want. I mean, it might put you to sleep, but there's some really cool stuff in there. So let's move over now to the data slate, where they have made some updates to a few core rules, some specific factions, and not going to go through all of these, but I did want to hit a couple. And Steve, I know you want to talk about a few as well. I'll talk first about the Chaos Space Marines, because that's one that I play. They have increased the range of the Dark Obscuration strat to increase the range to 18 inches. So that, again, that's a really cool update. I think it improves. I don't know if Chaos Space Marines needed to be improved, but we'll see. It just makes them a little more potent. They definitely didn't get nerfed for sure.
No, but I consider them a fairly technical army. I've watched you play them, and they're not necessarily straightforward. It's a lot of bookkeeping there. You need to know where what is, and what does what.
You got to have the synergies need to be there. You got to have the right units close, especially if you've got more of the dark mechanicum, machine type stuff. But just like any army, it's got some nuance, and you got to keep certain units close to another. But combat patrol, though, I would say it's a fun army to play. So I recommend that one.
Fun.
The other thing I want to mention 2 others. One was Chaos Demons. Chaos Demons have always gotten the shaft, it seems, over the past few editions. They're just kind of there, and now they're still on the meta watch, still at 45%. So somebody's figuring it out. But they didn't get anything. No buffs, no nothing. And they're a very melee heavy army, and 10th is historically, I guess so far what most are saying is that it's not a melee heavy edition where there's just a ton of melee combat. I beg to differ. When I play orcs, it's still very punchy, but it's not as punchy as it used to be because of some of the mechanics, and they're favoring the range, which I get. But I was surprised Chaos Demons didn't really get much at all. I'll go down to the Aldari, which are at the top. Their Strands of Fate did get nerfed, which is nice because it was 12d6. Now it's 66. I think that's a whole lot better, and it's more reasonable because those Strands of Fate where you could just automatically win, automatically pass and reminds me of Votan when I could change
That's right.
the dice to a 6 if I wanted to. It feels awesome when you're doing it for a little while. Then you're like, okay, this is kind of, what happened to the random dice game?
This is a turkey shoot.
Yeah. So those are the couple, and then of course Space Wolves, they got a little bit of a cool buff that allows you to select their sagas, their epic deeds of moment, and that was always one of the reasons I like Space Wolves, because they're telling these big stories around a campfire about what they're going to do, and now you can change that up at the end of the turn versus at the end of the entire round, so that you can shift throughout the game, which is cool. And I think it allows you to select more sagas, so you're not just locked into one, and you can issue new orders and do new cool stuff. So those were the main ones. Steve, I know you wanted to touch on the Blood Angels. So there were some updates there, but I think they've added some buffs to their attack, to their strength. The power fist goes up to 10. There's some really cool stuff there
that's big.
I guess I'm surprised not to see more, because the Blood Angels at the bottom. But what were your thoughts on the Blood Angels changes?
I think they need something. They are a very melee-oriented Space Marine army. I've never played them. I like them. I think they're really cool. They got some pretty neat units. They got a lot of cool synergies, especially if you were to throw some, what are they? The Death Company, the guys that they're just doomed and they're just bound to die anyway, right? I think that's really cool. I like the whole Red Thirst thing, +2 to strength and +1 attack, all that stuff. That would be their bread and butter, right?
Yeah, and their power fists though are the big thing, because those power fists now go to strength 10, which going up against
it's like
vehicles,
dreadnought strength.
Yeah. So very, very punchy. And then you add a chaplain to that, and now you've got +1 to wounds. So we just talked about the with Chaos Space Marines needing more of the synergies and having units around. I think Space Marines in general, which is one of the reasons why I don't think that they're always the most beginner friendly. You have so many different units to pick from and to pull together to say, okay, I'm going to have this one next to this one, next to that one, and the dominoes all have to fall in a certain area. You can still be okay with Space Marines and not do that, but it's like you're missing out if you don't have all of them stacked, on top of one another. So I feel like that the Blood Angels, now they're just getting straight buff, which is cool, and then needing a chaplain. But I think that Blood Angels players are going to find a way to really maximize that. So that was one. I wanted to get, Steve, your take. Out of those are the main ones from the data slate that I saw. What are some that really hit it for you, or some significant changes?
I think we mentioned the Drakari that's coming up. That whole new detachment thing. That's pretty awesome. I remember the Iron Within animation. And you really got a sense of these guys don't like stand their ground and fight. They're jumping on skimmers and bikes and transports, and they're coming out of nowhere, and they're hitting and they're running. And from one of our friends in our circle that plays Drakari, that the rules weren't really helping that right now. Right. I mean, I think this is going to be cool. Even last edition, I feel like most people leaned into those big hulking, like, I don't know, racks or whatever they're called, or homunculus, or I don't even know what they're called, but the ones that are like stitched together from extra parts, and then given growth. So those are like big bulky things. I don't remember seeing a lot of people, just rushing into all the fast, speedy stuff. I think this is really cool. I think this is, you're going to see a lot of those little skimmer things, at those little boats that they ride on. And because those things are
hard to pick up. Like if you pick those things up, you're gonna put some cuts in your fingers. So I was playing against our friend of the show, Mallory, and when she had all these spiky boats, and I was trying to help her move it around, and I tried to go pick it up from like the top, and I'm like, and one of the spears poked me in the side, and then I tried to reposition my hand, and I got, there's more spears and more spiky parts on the side of the boat. There's just no good place to pick those things up. So, but yeah, the Drukhari get a new detachment. That was kind of the big news out of this before the codex, right? So there's no codex. So I think they're just kind of throwing them a bone. Like you don't have a new codex. So we're going to give you a new detachment, which I think is cool. Allows you to, I think that the focus on this one, the Sky Splinter Assault, is giving a boost to the army for more transport heavy stuff, like allowing you to, if you're within 6 inches of transport, you get benefit of cover. If you're using, if you get the benefit of pain tokens where you can ignore cover and you get the lance ability, that also applies to your transport. So if you're using it, I think it's geared towards a Drukhari army that is primarily looking to transport their models into the battle, and that's what gives them. It makes sense. Sky Splinter Assault, right? It makes sense.
They're not very durable. I mean, they do die pretty easy from playing combat patrol. So you really need a way to get them across the board fast, and maybe even re-embark them to get back into some protection and stuff. So I think that'll be really cool. I think. I know everyone gets a little upset about some of this stuff, right? But I try to read between the lines through a lot of this. And if you take this detachment and you take some of the other stuff we talked about, and I know that there's been a huge whole discussion about how 10th is not as geared toward tournament play and maybe not as good for tournament play, but for players like us, it is good. And I really feel when they're doing this kind of stuff, I feel like they're leaning into the thematic. They're leaning into the lore, and things feel better. I don't know. I felt like in 9th, you could cluster your stratagems in a way that you could kind of tailor your army that way. But I feel like they're kind of doing that for you and saying, hey, this is how this kind of operates in the lore. This is how the story should go. And this makes sense to this faction. I don't know, you have the Kroot coming out. That's a nice addition. Is it going to be great? I have no idea because I don't know anything about them.
Well, they're more melee heavy, right? I mean, that gives you a different option.
But it leans into, so there's going to be some crazy rules for them, I'm sure. But it leans into that aesthetic, that lore, and all that stuff that makes the Dadhammer style of playing, so much fun.
The official
it keeps
style.
you interested. Yeah, the official style. It keeps you interested, So I think that is what I'm liking about these data slates and stuff.
What are your so looking at there's a ton of extra stuff that we're not covering in the small time that we had, because you could literally pour through each one of these and talk for hours and hours on each change. So I think those were the main ones for us. But Steve, I wanted to ask you, what were your thoughts overall on just the balanced data slate, the rules commentary, anything in particular that stood out as a big deal, or more like, was there anything that you were hoping to see changed or nerfed or buffed, or anything that you didn't see, anything like that, one way or the other?
Yeah, a part of me was sort of surprised that I didn't see some more Necron stuff, but they did just get a codex and they did just get a nerf a little bit.
Change them right away. Right?
That's a lot. The Dark Angels, their codex isn't even really out yet. It's just been for pre-order. We just got a tease, so it would be pointless to do anything with those guys, right? I think what I really appreciated was the core rule changes, what little there were, but this commentary stuff, it is as close to having a conversation with the company as you can get, right? Like all these rules are like, I don't know what that means. How should we interpret that? And I think they're doing a good job of trying to come around, well, this was the intention, or no, we really messed up. We didn't foresee this little tidbit about it, so we're going to go ahead and change that. I think that's really good. All the rest of the stuff is very granular, like these faction things and stuff. They don't mean much to me because I don't play them, and I'm not that good. I'm not good enough to to draw out every little morsel, you know?
Well, I think that's the other thing too, is that I was thinking about this, and I remember when I first started playing 40K, and they would release the data slate and the balances and the points updates, and here's new stuff, new interpretations of the rules, new enhancements. And as a new player, especially in the first like 3 to 4 months, I mean, I'm like, I can barely keep up with what I'm supposed to roll, or what the stats mean. Are they wounds? Are they damage? Where's the health bar? I'm asking basic questions, and they're throwing out more stuff, and it's overload for me. And I remember making this statement, and I made this statement on Reddit, I think, and I got flamed for it. But I made the statement. Literally, you could make any statement on Reddit and you get flamed for it.
Yeah.
But I made the statement like, when the new data slate was coming out, and I had several new players on there asking questions. And I said, I only play by what's in the codex. If it's not in the codex, it like doesn't exist. And I've changed my tune a little bit on that, because I understand the core mechanics of the game. And so when they do updates, my brain has the capacity to take that in, because I've already memorized some of the core stuff. But for most players that are just starting out, this is overload. This is so much more, honestly, that you don't need. If you don't want to play with these rules, you don't have to. There is nothing required, unless you're going to go to a tournament. If you're going to go to a tournament and put your name in there and go against people that have jerseys, that's when you're serious. You got a Warhammer team jersey, you're like, oh snap,
that's right.
These people are able to read all this stuff. But if you're just playing with your buddies like we do, you just make up your mind. Do you want to play with the updated rules? Do you want to look at the rules commentary? I think our group now does, just because most of us know the game well enough. But Steve, I'll throw this question. Yeah, exactly. I'll throw this question back to you. Do you think it matters to new players, or maybe at what point should it start to matter for a new player?
For a new player, I would just forget it at the moment. And honestly, I would just play it as simple as you can, because it's going to take a minute. I mean, we're a few years into playing, and we're
still trying to figure it out.
And we're still just sitting here talking about like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and yeah, I can adopt that, right? I think what really hurts a new player is because you have to list build, and that doesn't change, and you have to build a list within points. The rule commentaries, the core mechanic changes, that's fine. That's no big deal. You're gonna play that out amongst each other anyway, and you're gonna interpret those rules however the house decides.
Yeah.
Points hurt though. Like you could completely torch somebody's list. They're like, man, I finally got my 2,000 point list collected, built. It may take a while. And we've talked about budget, and we talked about all those things, and they're like, oh, well, now I'm 50 points over because they torched this one unit. Now for us, we'd be like, man, I don't care. I wouldn't have known it if you wouldn't have told me, but that could be rough, man. I mean, I say like that model was a dreadnought or something, that's a $60 model. And now this poor guy is like, I don't have enough models to backfill the hole that thing left,
Or I had the opposite problem with Votann when they
that's right.
When they did me a quote unquote, they did me a favor, and they lowered the points values drastically. I mean, I basically got an extra 400 points with the exact same models. That's a gift, right? And that's one of the reasons why Votann went to the top, is now they're not necessarily great at any one particular thing, but there's just so many, and they kind of turned them into a horde army, which I don't necessarily like, but whatever. But I had 2,000 points before that of models fully painted, very detailed painted. I spent a lot of time with these guys because they're my favorite army. And then when they lowered the points, I go back down, and I don't have enough to field a full 2,000 point army. It's like 1,600 points.
Nor did they even make enough units to get
exactly.
Yeah.
So now I have to buy. I would have to buy more models. But going back to what we said earlier, I don't like to buy repeats if I don't have to. So I'm just going to wait until they come out with a giant, Votann dreadnought that looks like just a big Votann head. That's what I want. Like what's that Marvel guy? Yeah.
Oh, like like Modor.
Modoc. Yeah,
Modoc.
Yeah. I want to be like one of those with the little legs and the arms just floating around.
Oh, you got to kit
That's what
bash
I
one of
want.
those.
Yeah, good.
Get that Sigmar head that's out there.
Totally. I mean, I think that this is cool for people. The balanced data slate's always interesting for nerds like us, that we have something to really digest and sink our teeth into. I like that they're constantly evolving the game, but for new players, I think it's overwhelming. The game's already overwhelming and complicated at times. So I would just coast on this one a little bit, learn to play the game, try to memorize the core mechanics and the core rules as best you can. And then, when you've got that down, when you have several games, I mean, I would say like 15, 20 games almost under your belt, what the phases are, when you can do, strategic reserves, and you've figured out the Overwatch, and you got all that down. Then bring in the balanced data slate, the rules commentary, because you've developed a mastery of what it means to redeploy or use your unit's abilities. So when you read this rules commentary, you're like, oh man, infiltrate ability. Hey, I've got some units that can do that, and I've been doing this with them during the game. Now you can connect the dots, right? It's not so foreign to read these new things all the time. So
yeah, don't feel like you got to drink from a fire hose.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, that's what it's like. It's like
you're already doing it. Probably. Yeah. More? You want more?
Okay, no. Here he comes.
Well, speaking of more, we're going to segue now into our next topic, which I am very excited to talk about, which is the new update to the 40K app. Whether you love it or you hate it, I don't know. Here it is. We're both subscribers to Warhammer Plus. I like the free models. I like the animations. This just comes with it. You can unlock the codes with the codex that you have to buy. We've talked about that being a thing, but whatever. They updated the app with a new feature that has been requested. Oh man, since day one, as soon as they released it. Called Command Bunker. And what this is a little button at the top of the screen when you've made in the Battleforge section of the app. So you open it, you make your list. Let's say you're playing a 2,000 point game of, Space Marine, Chaos Space Marines, whatever, and you make your full list, and now you're ready to go. You've made your list in the app, and it's pretty competent at being able to do that. But now you want to go play, and you don't want to print out all these PDFs. You don't want to bring the codex and thumb through that with the sticky notes and everything, which is, I prefer to play digital. So now you want to do that. So you hit this button, and it gives you a nice formatted, simplified list of sorts that you can look at your army, and it shows you without having to expand everything. So that was one of the problems previously when you're playing live and you want to all right, I want to move my intercessor squad and I want to know how far they move. Well, you got to go. If you were in another unit, you had to go back, tap that, then you got to go into the intercessor squad. Then you have to expand if you want to know if they have abilities. It was a pain. So now you've got the option of using this command bunker and the big new feature, and I hate to say it like this because other apps have had this feature forever, and there's tons of them out there, but this is the official one. When you update the war gear on the units during the battle, when you're creating your army, it automatically updates it on the command bunker, so you can actually use this app while you're playing.
Yes.
I mean, and it works. So I'm very excited about this just for the fact that they've added basic functionality. It's kind of sad, but they've added basic functionality, and I can really use this thing now as my tabletop companion. So I'm excited. Steve, are you as excited, or are you feeling a little other way?
Oh, well, I'm very excited about the changes because I think we've been trying to do that. I think the last game we played, when I came over last weekend, and I left all my sheets that I had printed out, and I was like, oh, this is going to hurt so much. It wasn't that bad. We were playing Combat Patrol, so it's a little easier to go back and forth. right out of the gate, you could touch the keyword and it would pop up the rule.
That's
That was
cool. Yeah, I
nice.
like that.
But you still had, like you said, you had to scroll back a couple pages to get to the abilities and get to all that stuff. Man, now this is all in one place. This is going to be so much easier. I was crippling myself by using a tablet and my phone, so I could like have a couple things pulled up, and I got through it. It was okay. This is going to be so much better. The hard part for me right now is it's not going to change anything for me. I'm going to keep going. Don't worry. But now you're locked out of everything. Now, this is a plus minus thing. Part of what's making this good is that they've taken all the codex stuff that you used to have to flip pages for, all the stratagems, and they've kind of condensed it down to where it's on the individual unit's data card. So you can kind of flip through. So I understand why they're locking people out as far as the codex goes. You got to have the codex to get all the info. Well, even though, then you could start playing without the codex as if they didn't, because the way it's set up, it's not a okay, you can have some of this, but not this kind of setup. It really is an all-sum game with the way they've done the UI on this app, which is a positive. However, I think if we're paying $6 a month for a subscription just to use an army builder, and you're competing with free ones that you can get all this stuff. I don't know. I'm not. It's a pet peeve. It's not a deal breaker, but it feels like they're just. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like you're pushing people further away from getting on board with it. I don't know.
My issue with this is that, and I buy the codex. I like the other thing is the collector in me is because I'm all in on a certain army. I like to collect things that are specific to the army. So when the codex is released for an army that I own, I go get it because I want the book that comes along with it. I don't use it. I don't use the codex for the data sheets. I use the app for the data sheets because they are doing these types of rules commentary, the data slate changes, all that stuff is brought in to the app. So like that's automatic. So this new change that they have, they're bringing those updates back into the app, and it's live, and I don't have to go back and look at a physical book, a codex, and say, hey, I know these are changed. Let me get my whiteout or my sticky notes or some extra paper, and I got to have this companion next to me. And now I'm like, why do I want to use the book? I'm not one of those physical media people, though, so I may be in the minority on this one, but I try to use, again, warts and all, I try to use the official 40K app, because when they update the rules, this is where it goes. So this makes it playable. My problem, and we've talked about this, a lot, but I still feel like it's a tale of two companies at Games Workshop. You've got a department that is all about updating. They are coming out with the books. They're coming out with the codex. That's their job. Their job is to make those things amazing. Anybody that wants to use them, there you go. And then you got another team over on the other side of Games Workshop, and this is a theory, but you got another team, and they're all in on the digital, right? And they don't care about the books. So then they release both at the same time, and now, but you kind of have to have both. So you have to buy the codex, even if you're not going to use it. Yeah, they give you the code. It's just like, why do that? Why not go all in on the rules commentary and the data slate updates and just say, you know what, we're going to be all digital, and we're going to release these books for the artwork, for the painting guides, for the lore, and here's some extra goodies to come along with the book. And it's more of a collector's item versus a have to have, because I buy it for the collector's item, but then now I feel like I have to use it because it's just, to me, it's a disjointed process.
Yeah. So here recently, it became a feel bad moment. I've got the Space Marines Codex on order, right? I play Space Marines. I might as well. Well, the Dark Angels codex. If I want to play the Dark Angels and use this app, I have to buy that codex. And I'm not really excited about that codex. I think for me, there's literally one detachment and its associated stratagems and rules that I want. And that's really all I want. But I really like this app. I like how I can take my tablet now, and especially with this update, I feel like I can finally use one screen and get through it. But I'm not going to be able to do it if I can't buy a book. If I have to buy the book. I have to buy the book. I'm like, can you give us a discount if you're a subscriber?
No.
Maybe you should get like no. Maybe you should get like a 15% book discount.
Well,
or
what about a premium? Even if they offered a premium subscription, like here's
do it.
Here's a silver and a gold, version. The silver version gets you just the animations and access to the app or something. Or they could do like the like Xbox Game Pass, where do you want PC and console? Here you go. So they could do the free miniature, maybe almost like they do with the magazine subscription. It's not what's it called? I can't remember. The Imperium, where you can get the free models. So they could do something like that and add an extra benefit to it to say, hey, if you go for the gold edition of this subscription, you get all these goodies. Plus, you get either a discount on the books, or you get a free piece of the rules, or the data sheets are free. I don't know, something.
2 codexes of your choice for the year.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Not even that, or even one. Like just to give something to show an incentive for people that are willing to pay a monthly subscription to stay connected. That's to me, that's your core audience. The core audience are the folks that are constantly connected. They're playing games week in, week out. They want to have the latest and greatest. They're in on these updates. And so they don't mind handing over money that's going to make things more convenient for them. And now you get them on a monthly drip so that they're not just buying a one-shot codex and never coming back. Right now you got them. That's just like Dungeons and Dragons with D&D Beyond. It's the same thing. So I was hoping 10th edition, when they released the index stuff, I thought, all right, this finally, they figured it out. They're going to be more in on the digital way of doing this. And now they've gone back to just the same thing they did in 9th edition. They've made the app better, but it's still the same thing. So I don't know. I'm excited to see the updates to the app. See, what would you like to see? They're going to be doing more iterations. It may take them another year, but what's the next thing you want to see in the app, if anything?
I'd love to see a Windows type interface where I can have tabs open. I can say, like, I can have the command bunker open, and say, you and I may have a similar army or something like that. What if I wanted to look at your army while I'm playing my army? I would like to have 2 tabs open that I could just go back and forth and just open this command bunker. Like, maybe I make up another army, or have all these extra favorites, or I have an extra page of specific rules that I made favorite, because that's something you can do on this. You can favorite rules.
Add favorites. That's a new thing. Yeah.
So let's say, like, we can't figure out and ever keep straight, like, who controls an objective. Bam, another page. And I don't have to get out of my command bunker to go to a core rule page. So, it would be nice to just be able to switch like that really fast.
I agree. I would like to see them for, I use a tablet instead of my phone, because that's usually what I have available. I want them to use the full, like, landscape view of the app. I would like for them to do that. So I would like for them to take, this consolidated phone view, and not everybody's going to use their phone.
That's right.
For me, I'd rather use the tablet, and maybe that's my old man eyes. I don't know, but I prefer the larger screen. And if I turn it landscape, I want to have more, not just a blown up version of the phone. So, but that's more of that's a part of a developer thing,
And that's an app thing, I think.
It's an app thing, and the developers have to choose to make specific for, iPad, Samsung Galaxy Tab, whatever your tablet of choice. So I don't know. I don't mean to dump on it, because I really like the feature that they've added with the command bunker. It's immediately usable for me. I'm excited to put it on and actually use it in our games. The one thing I do wish they would add is that they didn't add the command bunker to combat patrol. So if you pull up combat patrol, you're still having to go back and forth, which is annoying. But maybe next time.
It's not as clunky with combat patrol because there's not as much stuff to scroll through.
It's still kind of clunky,
but it's a little clunky, yeah. Because you still need to look at core rules every once in a while. That doesn't change.
That's true. I mean, you can search for those, which is nice, but maybe the favorites will help. I have to really put it through its paces to see. So lots of cool stuff coming out. Very exciting times as always in the Warhammer community. Man, I'm trying to decompress now with everything we talked about. There's so much that now I'm going to have to remember going into our next game. So. Well, that will actually wrap our show. Had tons to talk about. Thank you again for listening to us. Hopefully this was enjoyable and helpful as you take your next adventure into the gaming world. Hopefully the Chaplain and the Bearded Ogor will come back and not be plagued by Nurgle next time. So that'll wrap our show for this episode of the Dadhammer podcast. Thank you, Medicae Steve. I am David the Warboss, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.